Hello and welcome to the No Drama Dharma podcast of the Leipzig Center of Contemplative Traditions. I'm your host, Marco Walter, Tibetologist and long-term practitioner. And with great joy it is that I will introduce to you today's guest, Anam Thubten, teacher of meditation who lives in California, who mainly teaches seminaries on meditation as well as publishing books. Again and again, he has published quite a number of books that very well received by the Buddhist community. And now living in California, but his training goes back all the way to the remote region of Golok in eastern Tibet, where you can still find some of the monasteries and practice tradition of the Nyingma in a very, you could say, old school way. And this is the tradition that he teaches from and that he was trained in. So thank you very much for being with us, Anam Thubten.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me to be on this platform. And yeah, thank you for that very kind introduction.
Yeah, so for this first set of lectures or a set of podcasts, we are circling around the possibility of transforming negative circumstances or unwanted circumstances into favorable circumstances as they are explained on the Buddhist path, but also as they are relevant for Western practitioners, Western people, in a way as to provide tools and clues how to deepen one's practice and meditation. And yes, so this, I think, is what we can explore today for a short while. And the general idea I had was that we discuss a little bit about the four maras. So to just quickly count them, we have two presentations of the four maras. We have presentation of the four maras as it's given in the, you can say, in the sutras, in the old text, and going back to the scriptures already from the Pali Canon. And here we have, you can say, Mara maybe as a translation in Western language, we can say, speak of a demon or a devil or an unwanted circumstances. And this starts with the Klesha Mara, the Mara that embodies all emotions, the Mara of death, the Mrityu Mara, the Skanda Mara, the Mara as a metaphor for the whole of conditioned existence, and the Devaputra Mara, or the Mara of the child of gods, that is the Mara luring the Buddha away from enlightenment. And we also have a second set of explanation of the four maras that can be subsumed as the four maras of the Vajrayana or of the Chur tradition, where we speak of the material, the immaterial maras as a set of two. And then we have the mara of the, you could say, the excitement, and finally, the mara of being bloated up by pride or by self-importance. Generally, Anam Thubten, how do you feel the maras are presented in the Chur tradition, for example? They're presented always as a step where the practitioner already has some kind of insight into the nature of emptiness, and then he tests this. I mean, that's the way I understand it. It's presented as a test also, facing the negative circumstances. Do you think this can also be transferred in a way that we can use this as a method for practice that can be used without the deeper context of emptiness or recognition of emptiness? but as a tool for everyday practice?
Yeah, that's a very good question. First, the topic you have chosen today is one of my favorite topic in the Buddhist teachings, called idea of turning unfavorable circumstances into a path or spiritual path or path to enlightenment. And it's, of course, perhaps the most important teaching in Tibetan Buddhism. And it can be, of course, taught from different perspectives, like from perspective of low vision mind training, as well as even from the perspective of the Dzogchen. It's not like there's one singular perspective on that teaching. There are numerous perspectives that we can implore, but it's very not only profound, but really useful wisdom. It's, of course, very much from the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, but it can be used by people from different walks of life, because everybody goes through at point in their life challenges, difficulties, and many people really don't have any kind of tools or wisdom how to deal with these difficulties in their life. Usually, when difficulties strike people, what they do is they react, they try to run away from it, or sometimes people become very angry or depressed, or other times people try to escape from the negative circumstances by maybe changing the circumstances. But often we realize that we really can't change the circumstances right overnight. We are at the mercy of all these circumstances that just life presents. Life never really consults with us. Life would never say, I'm going to throw these circumstances tomorrow morning. Would you like that? Or not like there's some kind of a cosmic restaurant of life where we can order everything that we like, and we say, oh, I'm not going to have this one or that. Life is not like restaurant where we can pick up some cosmic menu and pick up what we like. Therefore, there's a teaching, the turning all negative circumstance into path is really useful. With that, you actually can take advantage of negative circumstances, because no matter how hard the situation might be, there's a silver line in all of them. There's a positive side of all of them, and that is they all can be turned into spiritual path. And so we can develop courage and resilience and compassion. And I think sometimes only way for many people to truly transcend their ego is not through always meditation, because meditation, when your life is okay, it's really hard to transcend your ego. And it's really difficult to let go of all your concepts, your preferences. But when life is a really difficulty, and then when you are on the spiritual path, almost life becomes this amazing guru who kind of force you to wake up and to let go of your ego, let go of all your preferences. And from that point of view, I think lots of the Buddhist practitioners of the past, like Longchenpa and Milarepa, really have already, they had amazing perspective on the difficulties. And as you know that, lots of people in Tibet, practitioners actually studied and contemplate teachings of great masters like Longchenpa, Milarepa, Majik Labdun. And so they have a totally different perspective about, in general, life, and especially unfavorable negative circumstances. They don't really look upon these circumstances as terrible or purely intrinsically bad, as maybe common people perceive in the ordinary world, and therefore this is such a timely teaching, because right now it feels that the world is going through lots of confusion, internal confusion, and difficulties. You can just spend a whole day talking about the problems that people are experiencing right now, even though in some sense world is kind of getting better with more food and more comfort and more luxury. But internally, the world is right now in a very much state of turmoil. This is a really good time to practice esteem, turning all negative circumstances into path. The very famous Law of John text by Chakavashi Dorje, and there's a verse that when the world is filled with the evil, turn all your neuroses as a path of awakening. And some people feel that this is the time, this is exactly the time, like the dark age. I don't think this is a dark age, but some people really feel that we are really going through lots of difficulties right now.
But we are also more, because of media, we're more exposed. I mean, like, it's still in our perception is more, I mean, as I think Buddhist practice always relates to the individual's perception of suffering or of the outer world. It's not really about what is the outer world, but it's how you feel it. So as we are constantly bombarded with media, with, you might say, with the news that are actually rarely uplifting, but rather depressing, and with a lot of war, or how you say, warmongering at the moment, it of course lets rise a strong fear also. And I think in general in practice, there is a common idea that practice should be like in almost like a safe space, like things have to be settled, there's your nice meditation cushion, it's quiet, and like you don't have too many thoughts to start with. But basically what's happening is, like, with one's regular mind, one will never really start, because it always seems to be like unfavorable. And integrating unfavorable conditions, whether on the cushion or whether off the cushion, seems to be a very appropriate way to invite everything that's already there. So, like, you're not inviting more trouble, the trouble is already there, you could say. But like you just make friends with, or let it be as it is, without judging it as such.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. It's not like things are getting worse. Some people feel that, but you perfectly point out some of the catalysts of this really global issue, like, there's pandemic, but I think there's psychological pandemic, which is the rise of anxiety and fear, confusion. And partly, you're right, we are very much bombarded by the cycle of negative news, and also somehow we're too educated right now. I think we know so much, sometimes too much. We know what is happening. Where maybe people who lived in a different time, like maybe a few centuries ago, maybe were not aware of all these problems that exist within their own country or beyond. But now we are kind of educated more than ever as a species. It seems we have so much information to the extent that we see all the problems, but somehow our mind has a tendency to go after the problems rather than to recognize also the beauty and the blessings and all the good things unfold in every moment. Let me go back to where we started, which is the four maras. You point out that there's the category of four mara, which is quite ubiquitous in many Buddhist sutras. The four maras, you counted it, is wonderful. And in the Chud, also there's the category of four maras, which is slightly different from the four maras in the sutra. I do think in some sense that you can use the whole idea of four mara in your everyday life to really understand yourself, understand your own whatever, your own neuroses or your own habits or your own pattern of activities, even though maybe you are not truly rooted in the understanding of like emptiness. When I see you, I'm not referring to you, Marco. I'm just
Oh,
talking
it
about
doesn't matter, you.
maybe I should say we. So yeah, so it's very useful. I don't think you have to understand the concept of emptiness in order to benefit from using this very interesting model. I kind of some kind of like model, psychological model of awareness or self-knowledge. It kind of shows how we suffer, and also the four maras in Chod is very wonderful way to go inside and to put all your neuroses into forms, into like archetypal forms, and then you become more and more aware of your own patterns, your neurotic pattern that cause lots of suffering. And that I think our neurotic patterns become less as the time goes by, because they're not completely self-sustained. They have to be fed, right? Like anything else. Otherwise, they can't go away. One of the powerful fuel to perpetuate our neurotic tendencies is actually unawareness, not really knowing who we are, not knowing our own interior world, not knowing our psychological patterns. So in other words,
I mean,
oh, yeah.
often we don't even want to know, like we feel a certain kind of uneasiness, and then, I mean, on a very gross level of perception, there's already the decisions not to go places, or not to face this or that person, or not to engage into this matter. And I mean, not necessarily, I think, it's not necessarily a meditative path to do your tax declaration, which I think can be very uncomfortable, but like rather on a more profound sense, facing circumstances or facing states of minds that show us that we feel extremely uneasy. And instead of going away from those mental places, like to be there and to face them.
Yeah, that's the key. You pointed really out this reality, and that in general, we human beings don't really want to know ourselves, especially part of us that might be not very holy, that might be very benevolent, even a spiritual practice, like people who have been practicing for a long time in the spiritual traditions have a one blind spot, and that is this unawareness, that they really unconsciously do not want to look inside and to just dredge up all neurotic patterns, because it's just uncomfortable, and maybe it's humiliating sometimes, but also I think what does, when I say Mara, I often use Mara to depict the human ego. Ego is not always bad. I'm not here to bash ego, but the ego is also some kind of very complex karmic and psychological structure. And that has a few functions. One of the functions is, of course, to survive, because we need ego in order to survive somehow in this world of relative truth, if you use Buddhist term. But then one of the functions of ego is kind of very counterintuitive for ourselves, because and that resists to enlightenment. That's what ego does. I always like to think ego as a Mara, who's a 24 hours a day job, is a full-time job, is to make sure that we want to become enlightened. So we're kind of very loving paradox. even we are spiritual because consciously we all want to become enlightened, and this is why many spiritual people do long-term meditation retreat, religious observance, but part of them is a really strongly and tenaciously resistant to the enlightenment, and that part is the ego, and I use usually Mara as a kind of archetypal
Yeah.
presentation of ego, at least that part of the ego.
Yeah, but there's always somebody who would like to be when the show starts, to be there, you know, like
Yeah,
to enjoy the own enlightenment and to be present at things happening, and to be patted on the back for having achieved it. And there's a huge fear of not
right.
being there, you know, like so I think, you know, you always have this term of bearing emptiness, being able to bear emptiness, because it's apparently not such a comfortable thing at first, to bear the non-existence.
Yeah, emptiness is a really perhaps most liberating truth if people really understand it. But on the other hand, people can have a very impressive conceptual understanding of emptiness, but to embody it is a whole another story because it's very scary for the ego. That's why you just use this famous Buddhist term from Mahayana's writings, to bear emptiness, because emptiness is just sometimes unbearable, painful, and it's even scary to our ego. So as a Mahayana Buddhist, people have really this kind of almost internal conflict, because as a Mahayana Buddhist, we're supposed to love emptiness. Emptiness is like our version of the ultimate truth. Since there's no God in Buddhism, emptiness is like the equivalent of a God. Buddhism as a religion. So the highest sacred in Mahayana Buddhism is not God, is not omnipotent present being, but actually is the emptiness, the true nature of all things. But then on the other hand, even Mahayana Buddhist, we really are afraid of emptiness. We love emptiness, but deep down we're really afraid of emptiness, which remind me of this very famous ancient Chinese story about artist who loved a dragon. He was in love with a dragon. He just started painting his whole house with a dragon. He even wore clothes filled with the dragon images. And then the gods traveled all there to the dragon, and dragon was very much flattered by learning there's a artist, this crazy artist who loves the dragon, decided to pay a visit to this artist. And someday, the artist was a drawing image of dragon, and this monster, like really scary looking creature, uh, with just a loud noise, like sounded like thunder, entered through his window, and he got so scared he ran away, he fainted. But that turned out to be the real dragon. So I use that story to point out this kind of internal conflict that lies in the consciousness of Mahayana Buddhist, which is that one may we love emptiness, but actually we don't love the emptiness.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why, you know, I think to truly embody emptiness requires lots of letting go, and the ego is not known for being good at letting go. I think that's the
Well, it's
weakness of the
in
ego.
Buddhist terms, the ego is the counterpart of the openness or of the letting go. So, and of course, I think, you know, for the listeners, it's important to see, you know, this is not, it's not just about acquiring a soft skill, like to become more friendly or more gentle in a way that you become more pleasant to your surrounding and like more workable or more efficient human being. In a way, the selflessness or the egolessness then means also the understanding of the non-existing of oneself to a very profound level that is at the same time liberating from the whole cluster of fears or the cluster of discomfort that comes with having to maintain being a person.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. You point out really perfectly the resistance to the awakening, and also the power of awakening, which is the realization of the emptiness. You're right. Yeah, emptiness is very challenging when we resist to it. But if we totally just open our heart and to embody it, then it can be the most liberating thing, because then lots of our fear and lots of our sufferings just go away. But yeah, the thing is that we are so much attached to our version of reality, in which that we are the center of this reality. And then we have all these really strong ideas about right and wrong, self and other, this and that. It's so difficult to wake up from this grand illusion of reality that our mind manufactured, the duality. And emptiness is just to let go of our attachment to that mind manufactured reality, and to see the way things are. But our ego is only used to that version of a mind manufactured reality, and is really afraid of seeing the true nature of them, because in such awakening, then you kind of have to see the reality that you have been believing to be true is turned out to be illusion. So you're going to lose a lot. Basically, you're going to lose so much from your mind. It's, and also I think our ego is attached to not only that version of mind manufactured reality, but ego just identify with all the illusions. Self is illusion, and there's like 1,000 illusions running in our life. Because ego is so attached to all of them, and ego does not know any reality other than that. And to let go of them is like invitation to some kind of its own death. And that's what ego does not want to die. Ego does not want to actually become nothing, because to ego to let go of that mind manufactured reality means death, almost internal
Yeah,
death.
that's why you call it also the Mara of death in one
Yeah,
classification. And
yeah,
it's death, of course, is the ultimate fear, like hanging above our heads. But at the same time, there's so many small, tiny fears that in practice can be related to, without even having the overarching concept of like final emptiness. There's so many small fears that can be faced by just accepting the fear as it is, and being in the present moment,
yeah,
and
yeah,
seeing that. I think for practitioners, just like staying with the discomfort and seeing that the discomfort is actually not as detrimental as I thought. This is
yeah.
already, this is what everybody can build on, I think, as practitioners.
Yeah, absolutely. I think um, yeah, you're right. I was reading recently this extraordinary text that I'm working on it. It's text revealed by Dinjam Namba, very famous Tibetan from the 19th century. I think he lived mainly in the 19th century, but you could say he's also from the 20th century. One of the most brilliant Tibetan Buddhist masters. I was reading yesterday, literally, his well-known text. I call it Vajra Tanda Nilgram Yid in Tibetan. And somehow I was reading a part of it where he basically deconstructed everything. It's just amazing. He literally deconstructed everything. It's almost, he was pointing out everything that we used to think is real. It's just illusion. It's all illusion. It's all kind of bunch of baloney. if I can use that.
Yeah, of course.
And but same time, I feel so liberating, even though his teaching is just tearing down all the illusions in front of me, not my illusion, but illusion of the world. Basically, he is just pointing out the great emptiness in which that literally everything that we think is real, we think is true, including self, this notion of I'm the center of the universe. Everything is just illusion. He deconstructed all of them. He didn't leave one single thing as, oh, this is everything is not real, but this is really real. He can take everything away. And yeah, he pointed out emptiness so beautifully. But then I think our ego does not really understand emptiness. Our ego think emptiness is some kind of very scary, dreadful, nihilistic nothingness, which is not. Emptiness is a totally beautiful.
And
Emptiness.
don't you think it's also, we often think in states, mind states. So when we are confronted with emptiness and a word, that like you would have a cake, and like every slice of the cake is like a certain state of mind, and like I think often we have a tendency to perceive it as another state of mind, as another induced state of mind. As of course we say that it's repeated in the Buddhist teachings over and over again that it's the basic state of reality, but at the same time the habitual pattern of everyone, I think, is very strong in labeling every new concept as another chapter or another piece, another state of mind that is like again defined or confined within a certain range of perception, and like another happy pill, you could say. You take this happy pill of emptiness and you drop into the state, and you have this whole discussion that people have about emptiness could be induced by medication, by a sort of wonder drug like ayahuasca, that like once for all you see the rug is pulled under your feet. The whole teaching on emptiness in Buddhism is also trying to give people the chance to again and again review the perception of fixed mind states, and that this is not another state of mind.
That's totally right. Yeah, the danger is that people have this tendency. It's not like some simple tendency, but really strong, deep-seated tendency to turn everything into something,
Yeah.
including emptiness. You're right. Emptiness should not be viewed as a state of mind. And then you point out the danger of doing that, which is that people think the emptiness of their mind, they would have a very precise preconceived notions of what that might be. And then they try to literally get into that state of mind as the emptiness. And whereas, life is not like some kind of static state of anything. Life is very much dynamic. It's always in motion. And just like weather, you don't know what is going to happen with the next few seconds. And so emptiness it's almost like this constant process of letting go our ideas, opinions, and also to question in our concepts too. I think one of the powerful way to practice emptiness is to question your concepts.
We have talked a
Reality.
lot about the question of the ego, but at the same time also it says nyema, which means also, as far as I understand the term, to be bloated up, to be like really self-assured, really like how you say in German you would say angeschwollen, just like fully of self-centeredness, but at the same time also with an assurance and a pride and something which you might even say that is an achievement in our society to have obtained, to be in the state where you can be like that, and other people would confirm this.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think this is then the most difficult of the demons to fear, because it means to put oneself into question at the point where it feels the best, when the party is the best.
Yeah, right. Yes, exactly. Yeah, emptiness is not a comfort. It's not even spiritual comfort. Emptiness is a process of constantly dropping our concepts, our ideas about reality. So it's not really comfort. It's not like some kind of state of mind that we discover and then we can retire in that eternally. It's not like that. It's a process of letting go, and therefore it's quite challenging to the ego too. I think it requires some kind of almost like courage to wake up, to truly embody and truly love the emptiness, not just lip service.
Yeah.
It's easy for people to offer lip service, the love to the emptiness as a Mahayana Buddhist, but to love emptiness requires some kind of courage. That's why I remember there are all these wild stories, anecdotes in Mahayana Sutras about somebody speaks emptiness, and then a bunch of people had a heart attack or something like that. They could not bear the idea of emptiness. And also, the emptiness requires courage. So, yeah, we need some kind of courage to see the true nature of all things, and that may not be the most enchanting thing to the ego, to the eyes of ego, but we kind of have the willingness to almost to take that risk. So the entrance to enlightenment is not always beautiful to me. It's kind of scary. It's not ugly. So entrance to the enlightenment to me is a really sometimes scary. It's not scary in itself, but it's just scary to the eyes of ego. So it requires lots of courage to truly embody and embrace the actual emptiness, not the emptiness that people imagine in their mind.
Yeah. And I think, in the four maras, there is a sort of progression also. First we have the material maras, the tangible things, things that we are afraid of, circumstances. And then it gets internalized by the gods and demons, the immaterial maras. So, which is very much, I mean, like, especially in Western society, it's very much a mental thing. I think in Tibet, most likely, gods and demons are much more real to people, like as concrete outer phenomena that you interact with. But
Right.
the way we live and we are brought up in a Western society, it's often that our gods and demons are, well, our happiness and fears that manifest, our hopes and fears that manifest within our own sphere of perception and within our own thinking, and like our dreams and our nightmares.
Yeah.
Then we have this like courageous confrontation in practice where we like invite them to stay. But then when we go to the further maras, then I have the impression that the courage has to be even greater, because as we spoke about before, we have the ego, and then to face the root of the problem, the self attachment. Is not anymore about things that are not the self, like that are apart from us and that we don't want or don't want. Then it's us. It's what we think we are.
Yeah.
And then especially when it comes to the very pleasant aspect, it's the things to view as not being real, the things we think we are and we are like good at, or we are, that make us up in a positive way, that's even worse for the ego to let go of.
Yeah, Margie Labdon in her short teachings used this term quite a lot, gods and demons. She used that term so many times to really point out the human neuroses. And sometimes in Chola, God refers to everything that is perceived as benevolent, favorable, good, perfect, and the demon is used as sometimes like a presentation, almost like that encompass everything that we don't like let's say everything that is perceived as a tragic, unfavorable, unholy, unwholesome. Uh, so anyway, basically, she teaches that gods and demons are just literally projections of our own mind. And then in the Chu tradition, the four Mara is in a different category than that of Mahayana Sutras. For example, the first Mara is Mara of tangible. In Tibetan language, Tokchi Gidit, Tome Gidit second, which is Mara of intangible. And then the third one is Mara of elation. And the fourth one is Mara of self-conceit or self-concepts. So anyway, it's a very brilliant conceptual model to really point out where we are stuck as human beings, why we are suffering. I would think that some of the Buddhist, some of the Tantric Buddhist teachings are like the most enlightened teachings, and also they're kind of extraordinary psychology. I call them sacred psychology, the sacred psychology, going beyond, Freudian and Jungian psychology.
Yeah.
I don't think of Sigmund Freud is into emptiness. I could be wrong anyway, but so so anyway, maybe Jung. I don't know. We'll see. so uh, so anyway, yeah, the first Mara, the Mara of tangible, it's kind of our relationship, our kind of unenlightened, our very human ego-based relationship with the world around us, like our furnitures, our car and smartphone. All these are forms that we
Yeah.
interact with everyday life, and we can have very much enlightened and ego-based relationship with them. Like, people have a very strong relationship with their cars, their houses, and we identify with them. If our car looks nice, we think we're great. We think maybe we're successful. Maybe we think that other people will admire at our fancy car, especially if you're driving, let's say, Jaguar or something like that. Because many people don't have Jaguars. Most people don't drive Jaguars. So imagine that you get a Jaguar, this expensive British car.
Yeah, yeah.
Then you think, you basically, yeah, you met it, and you're on the top
Yeah.
of top of the world, and then has the ego loves to draw attention from other people. So, and then if whatever our car is not so great, then we may have like whatever, like guilt or shame or direct towards oneself, and other people might look at us as maybe not so successful. So anyway, and not only that, we have such a strong attachment, and sometimes it's purely psychological. Do you know that sometimes people have a really hard time to let go of old males? Old males that like males that accumulate.
Yeah.
It's not useful. It's not even you get some kind of social status from that. You can't
Yeah.
really demonstrate. You can't. I'm great. Look, I have like a 50 old males that I never threw them. And many of them, I researched 10 years ago, 20 years ago, but, it's very psychological, attachment is psychological. So this attachment, as well as this kind of unenlightened relationship, ego-based relationship with the world around us, the material world or the acquisitions can be regarded as the Mara of a tangible, the devil of tangible. it's called devil because in Buddhism, devil is Mara, whose job is to make sure that we won't become enlightened or we won't become free.
Yeah, and it's like, say, it's everybody's, you might say, or almost everybody's present state, you could say, and still on when presenting the Mara, it seems to be the most gross.
And then the Maras of intangible, which is very psychological, point out. You're right. In the Western world, as you know, that there's like so, yeah, there's just so much suffering that are often product of psychological issues and mental issues too. And of course, the many people in the West are struggling with their basic livings, but overall, the Western world is very much, in many ways, like the heaven on earth, if I can use that expression. Relatively, it's all relative, right? In comparison to the rest of the world, I think Western world is kind of heaven on earth in terms of material richness and like the democracy, individual freedom, and so forth. When you put all of them into one packet, you could say that right now, as a 21st century, the Western world is actually quite amazing. It's a heaven on earth, but yeah, of course, that does not mean there are no issues. We still have lots of issues like poverty, but overall, I think many people are really enjoying pretty much a good life in the Western world. And but same time, there's so much suffering in the Western world, which are not always product of the circumstance situation they're living in, but often product of psychological issues like self-hatred, self-doubt, and anxiety, and fear, confusion, and many of them have to do with the self, the ego, and also I
Yeah.
think the competition and comparison are very much this state of modern
Would
Western.
you would you relate that to a heightened level of stress? Of course, I think, people in the East as well also have a lot of fears and a lot of imaginations, and but at the same time, when we look at least at the classical presentations or Tibetan texts and dealing with Chö, with fears, and the fears are more archaic, like they are fear of something, and often it's externalized, um, and I wonder if in a surrounding where it's maybe more simple, or more, you could say, the connection with the elements is more straightforward, one's inner suffering expresses, or one's inner unruliness expresses more in a tangible way.
Right, yeah.
Whereas in a situation where there's a lot of impulses, a lot of stress, a lot of busyness, and also a lot of pressure of achievement, that this becomes more and more internalized, and that, like I say, our gods and demons become very much more the play of our own thoughts.
Right, yeah. Yeah, you're right. Well, one of the perhaps one of the main cause of the suffering, the mental suffering in the Western world, is of course the marrow and tangible. But if we explain what that is in more like simple language, I think what is happening in the West is that the religious traditions are dying somehow slowly, and the whole Western society is becoming more and more secular. But in that process, I think what happens is that they lost something. They lost the connection with the sacred. And I'm just using the word sacred, not in theistic terms or not in non-theistic terms, just sacred in general. in Buddhism, emptiness sacred, and other traditions, theistic traditions, sacred is maybe something very specific. But I feel that the West is losing slowly connection with the sacred in general, or the ultimate truth. And we become more and more secular, and problem that now we're left with ourselves, right? Now our relationships, with ourselves, because we hold a relationship with the sacred. In that sense, I think we're kind of stuck with our own ego. We are stuck with ourselves. We're stuck with our neuroses. Whereas when you have connection with the sacred, that connection becomes a transcendence where you can kind of transcend yourself. You can drop all your self-centered ideas, desires, the like, dislike, all this stuff. You can just drop all of them. And
Yeah.
modern Westerners don't have anything like that, and so we're stuck with ourselves. And not only that, and then in some sense, I think our goal becomes that kind of weird version, maybe not weird, I cannot say that, but it's kind of version, secular version of self-actualization, which is to actualize yourself or to your true potential, become very much individuated. In doing so, we become sometimes more and more self-centered, more like whatever, reactionary, and we are creating this kind of boundary, like wall between ourselves and the world in the process of so-called individuation or self-actualization. But when there's no connection to transcendence, and that whole process can be hijacked by ego.
Yeah.
I hope this is making sense.
Oh, it does make sense. And it's like, I think there's like many different spheres intertwined. You have like you might say, even though the term religion is a difficult term, because where does it start, where does it end, what is religion? But then you might say that it might present something other than the person. It might present something more global, the way of just achieving one's own goals, and to like die having achieved one's own goals makes you a made man. Like how was he called, the founder of Apple?
Right. Yeah.
And very much portrayed, I think, as the person who used his life to the full and who achieved all of his own goals. And from the point of transcendence, you would put that into question, if that was like, if that was all. But he's revered as like somebody whose every step he took was to achieve everything he could. And he passed away at the peak of self-achievement, almost like a holy man of IT or of computer science, or of computer marketing, whatever you call it. But like at the same time, it shows a tendency of belief, a view of belief that achieving one's own goal is the primary thing, and this being recognized by others is then finally the confirmation for this being true.
Yeah.
And we never know, it's like what we see of the person is only two-dimensional. We never know what the person really thinks or feels, but still it becomes a goal in our society. And we don't know if the person is sleeping happily or not.
We don't know. We don't know whether he was happy or not. We don't know. Maybe
it's an assignment of happiness to a certain kind of achievement, which is left as it is. And I think from the from the Buddhist psychological point of view, the gods and demons might still very much be at work.
Absolutely. Where perhaps some yogi in a caves in Tibet who doesn't on one penny, perhaps way more happier than the founder of the Apple, We don't know, right? Could be.
Yeah, but from a point of achievement, there's a paradox, because what is an achievement in Buddhist terms often is a non-achievement in the terms of society, you know? Like
Yeah.
in terms of society, you'd be called a loser.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Well, it's like almost there's a new religion that is everybody, that is embraced by everybody pretty much, yeah, and that religion has a name, and it's called materialism. It's the new religion.
Yeah,
Itself is a religion because I mean, literally, people worship success as well, maybe used to worship God. So it's kind of religion. It's like global religion, the materialism, and which is not great news. If there's a global religion, it should be like maybe a religion of love or religion of compassion. I think, I don't expect that the whole world is going to embrace one sacred tradition. But let's say maybe we can entertain the idea, the religion of a love, or religion of a kindness, or religion of a contentment, and that kind of very much possible idea. Is not totally utopian fantasy. I mean, it's possible that someday all the humanity realize that where the number one goal in their life is not so much all this achievement, but to go inside and to basically, yeah, to develop all these noble principles, like, let's say, compassion, love, and maybe even eventually enlightenment. I'm sure everybody will have their own idea of what enlightenment is. But right now, as far as we can see, the materialism is like the new religion, and that has no really heart in itself. There's no really real transcendence.
The strong thing in it is like the constant idea of improvement. Material improvement, but it's at the same time self-improvement. And I mean, as a critique, you can say this is exactly what corporate mindfulness does.
Exactly.
Take the idea of improving your mind, letting go of unwanted mind states in order to become more performant, based in, let's say, broken rudimentary Buddhist techniques or imported Buddhist techniques, but without a view of everything that's around, just using a certain technique to improve the person, which was never really the intention at the first place.
Yeah, not at all. That's not why Buddha taught meditation. I think that meditation to go beyond the self, not
and I think we could explore this for many more hours, and I wish we do another session. And for today, we can close the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. This is great. It's such a nice to be with you on this platform and to talk about really meaningful, relevant topics, and hope that the many people in the world will have a chance to contemplate emptiness, bodhicitta. That would be good.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for sharing your personal insights or your personal takes on the practice of difficult circumstances and transforming them within the church tradition, because this is what we try to do for the Center of Contemplative Traditions, is to also bring up the personal takes on it and not just canonical explanations, because these we find in books, and this is what we want to also provide. Thank you so much, Anam Lama.
Yeah, thank you so much,